Hi everyone, I'm Kenny with SPT. I am the East Coast apricot specialist, and today we are doing a very special interview with our winners from the American Lab Heroes competition. So we're right here in Boston, Massachusetts at Day Zero Diagnostics. And to start out, I'm just going to have our winners introduce themselves.
Ian Herriott from Day Zero Diagnostics, and I'm the Director of Sequencing Technologies here.
Hi, I'm Brookhart, also from Day Zero Diagnostics, and I'm an RA on the Sequencing Technologies team.
Great, so if you guys want to just start out, just kind of introduce Day Zero, where you guys have been, and what you're doing now, and where you're going as a company, as a group yourselves. We'd love to hear more.
Yeah, great. Day Zero Diagnostics is an infectious disease startup company here in Boston. We are pioneering sort of a new class of diagnostics that's based on whole genome sequencing and an ultra-high enrichment of pathogens from human specimens that aims to replace a lot of the microbiology processes that take days in a laboratory to hours on a device, on an instrument that we are currently doing R&D around and hope to get into hospitals in the near-term future.
We have a lab services arm of the company where we do testing for hospitals and have a very rapid turnaround time to give them information about the transmissibility of infections within their wards.
That's great. And Allie, what would you say, your day-to-day, with all the big picture stuff that we just covered there, what's the day-to-day like here at Day Zero?
Sure. So for the sequencing group, we do a lot of library preps for different sample types, different workflows, different next generation sequencing kind of technologies. So it's a lot of manual pipetting of clear liquids. But yeah, it's very exciting.
And Day Zero, how would you classify it? Obviously in the startup space, like what's the size? How many people are at Day Zero now?
Yeah, we started at 0 people. I'm actually employee 0, but we're over 50 now.
That's awesome.
And so it's been an expansive growth over the last 5 years here.
Yeah, and I that's definitely something that I think defines, obviously, the life science research very generally, particularly in the United States, but obviously in the Boston, Cambridge area here. You're the story of many startups, of many companies, and glad that you guys have been so successful over the last couple of years. But specifically today, obviously, we're here in reference to the American Lab Heroes, and we were very excited that you guys were able to win our Apricot S3 automated pipettor. So I want to dive into a little bit more of the specifics about what you guys do and sort of the journey with that instrument and getting that in here for you. So I guess talk to me about what your most common applications were. I know you talked a little bit about the library prep and everything, Allie, but just tell us that day-to-day specifically, what protocols were you writing, the labware, things like that, and how are you doing it?
So we had another benchtop automation system that had certain use cases for us, but it wasn't able to do most of our other pipetting work, so it was still a lot of manual multi-channel pipetting. We really needed something for 96-well plates because that's what the majority of our work is in. In particular, one of our work streams goes from extraction through library prep, and we do 4 96-well plates a week. And it's very repetitive, lots of manual pipetting with a multi-channel that's very time consuming, and you really have to be thinking about, am I in the right row and the right column and everything. And it gets pretty tedious over time, and there's occasional errors. So we were really looking for something in particular for that process to put on.
And how much time would you say you spent a day or a week manually pipetting before the apricot?
All day.
All day? All day, yeah. No,
day.
Yeah. So, and obviously you weren't the only one. I'm sure there was multiple people, right, that were manually pipetting every day in these workflows.
Yeah, there's 3 of us on our team who do a lot of manual pipetting.
Yeah.
So you're saving a lot of thumbs.
Yes, that's good to hear. So obviously moving into the actual competition here. So were you guys familiar with Apricot or SPT at all previously?
I was certainly familiar with SPT as a company and some of the other instruments that are pretty well known in NGS space, like the mosquito. That's one that definitely been interested in and excited about. The opportunities that particular technology has brought to a lot of NGS workflows in colleagues at labs, and it's not something that I had been familiar with, the apricot specifically before, but we were definitely looking for a 96 well solution that would take a lot of our 8-channel and 12-channel to kind of the next level. As we've kind of grown as a company and the number of employees, I think that being deliberate about scaling the automation was something that didn't track with the total number of people that we had on the team. So finding this opportunity to enter the American Lab Heroes contest was seemed too good not to enter, and
absolutely
can't believe that we won.
Right. And now, Allie, you were our individual winner. So could you just talk a little bit, how did you find out about the competition? Was it you, someone on your team? How did that all go?
Sure. So one of our team members was kind of keeping an eye on SBT Lab Tech and sent it around the team and said, we should have as many people enter as possible because it seemed like it would be a really good fit. And a few weeks later, we got an email, and I thought it was fake for a little while, but it wasn't, and it was really exciting.
Well, that's good. And like I said, very glad that we could end up partnering up, and that's obviously where I entered the story there. And if, just speak a little bit, if you can, about, once we reached out and announced the winner, which we were really excited about, just kind of the process. How did installing the instrument look? How did it go with training? Things like that.
Sure. So before the install, we had an initial conversation about what our needs are, what volumes for pipetting and everything to kind of pick the best core to start out with. And then for the actual install day, that happened really quickly in the lab. I think in under an hour, everything was set up and ready to go. And then by the end of the day, we had most of our plates calibrated. We were mocking up most of our protocols. So it was really quick. Within the week, we were doing a lot of our processes on apricot.
Yeah, and I think it's really easy to see that is part of the biggest advantage to the apricot is it is so simple, and it's so easy to use, easy to set up, and that process typically goes pretty quickly. So we already talked about what your workflows looked like before, and how ergonomically and time-wise it was not very not as productive before. So we go through the install. How has the time saving, ergonomic savings, the efficiency, reproducibility, if you could just talk about those workflows you already mentioned, but post apricot install, what have you guys been working on, sort of everything like that?
Sure. So a lot of our workflows, they used to be very tedious, and it would take, a whole afternoon to do something. And now it's like you put the plate on the apricot, and within a few minutes, it's all set and ready to go. So what used to take, 4 hours and be really stressful, and, one pipette's missing the volume, especially at very low volumes if that's a challenge. And now it takes, an hour, and you look at the apricot as it's going, and just all the volumes are perfect across the board, and it's just much less stressful, everything's being done correctly.
Yeah, that's great to hear. The reproducibility is really second to none, I think. And I'm sure not as much as the end user, but knowing that the quality is going to be there is a huge part for you as well. So if you're able to, we'd love to hear, a little bit more about the specific projects that you guys might be able to talk about, and dive into the science behind what the apricot is helping to really automate.
Yeah, we have a lot of NGS preps that we've mentioned, and really those are across a couple different platforms. So we do a lot of Illumina sequencing, and we have several tens of thousands of Illumina sequencing libraries that we've generated by hand over the years, and the acceleration that the apricot will provide this year is a value that I immediately appreciate, and I'm excited about how that will allow us to scale some of that production sequencing on the Illumina side. We also have, and I think one nice thing that I've seen just in the last couple of months with the apricot is that we're kind of always thinking about new steps within existing workflows that are portable to the apricot. So we also do a lot of Oxford nanopore technologies sequencing, and that's another workflow that we've in recent weeks been doing a lot thinking about, and getting protocols plugged into the apricot and having that leverage on the other workflow. We have a lot of other teams in the company too, not just the sequencing technologies group. We have lots of other teams, and I think they're very interested in the efficiencies that they're seeing on the other side of the lab, and so we're excited to bring in additional cores for different volumes and get some of the other teams on board as well, but we might need a second instrument to fully accommodate.
No argument for me here, so that's good. Allie, was there anything that you would add, any projects that you're working on or anything like that? If not, that's totally fine too. So no, covered everything. Okay. I guess the other big things, we'd love to hear is if you were speaking directly to someone who is still doing their protocols by hand, they're doing their preps, their library generation, whatever it may be, by hand, what would you say the biggest benefits are specifically about automating and why you would go with the S3 ultimately?
Sure, so I think time-wise, that's like the number one thing is it saves so much time versus manual pipetting, especially for things that are, tough volumes or mixing, things like that. It's just so much easier to do with the apricot. I think reproducibility is also a really important thing for us and for most people who are doing manual pipetting, and that's been great. And I think just also ease of use, there's no coding, there's no writing scripts or anything. Like, it's very intuitive to work with the software and input your labware and have it do exactly the steps you want it to do.
Yeah, that's great. And I was gonna specifically dive into that. If there's anything, I don't know if you've dealt with other automation in other places or just, as a first-time user, could you talk a little bit specifically about the software itself, like that user interface? What do you think either the biggest benefits about it or is that ease of use kind of go through that for me and what that was like as a first-time user?
Sure. So we do have another robot that's slightly different. It requires scripting in R, and they've spent hours of just parsing errors or things not working correctly. With the apricot, it's basically just, buttons that are very clear of like, what do you want the robot to do? Do you want it to aspirate? How much? Do you want it to mix? How much? And it's very intuitive and easy to use. Yeah,
that's awesome. And I would definitely think that, clearly separates from the other instrument that you guys have, but separates from most automation.
I think that's a really important point for me as well. I think that I had seen there sort of being a big gap between multi-channel electronic pipetting and full-on liquid handling robot automation, and the sort of the niche that the apricot fills is a very easy transition between the two, or just a space that I hadn't really recognized as being such a valuable opportunity to leverage. It doesn't take any space on the bench, really. That's something that is at a very high premium in our lab right now. So the footprint is really, modest, and it's very efficient in that regard too.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank both of you guys, one for participating in the competition. It's always great, to have more people involved with the SPT brand. It's been a pleasure to work with both of you, and I'm really excited to continue our partnership as your lab needs grow and your team continues to grow, whether that's more instruments, more versatility, and more capabilities in the instrument, or crossing to other products in the family. So thank you guys again for taking the time and sort of talking through your experience. Everyone at SPT really appreciates it, and I hope that everyone who's had a chance to listen and watch in today has a little something. So please reach out to us here or any of our other channels or social media to be able to contact your local rep about apricot or other SPT products.